In South Africa, the Minister of Finance, Enoch Godongwana, has presented his budget speech, which he says is aimed at ensuring a stable macroeconomic framework to create a conducive environment for savings, investment, and growth. Gondogwane said the ministry will be implementing growth-enhancing reforms in key sectors, particularly in energy and transport, while strengthening the capacity of the state to deliver quality public services, invest in infrastructure, and fight crime as well as corruption. However, the medium-term growth outlook shows deterioration, with real GDP growth projected to average 1.4% from 2023 to 2025, compared with 1.6% estimated in October. The minister also proposed a total debt relief arrangement for Eskom of 254 billion rand.
We're tabling the 2023 budget in a difficult domestic and global economic environment. The global recovery is slowing. Domestic load shedding has become more persistent and prolonged, impacting on service delivery and threatening the survival of many businesses. This is compounded by the disruption to freight and logistic networks.
Let's talk about this now. Professor Bonke Dumisa is an independent economic analyst. He's joining us from South Africa on this subject. Prof, good evening to you and thank you for your time here.
Good evening to you and your News Central listeners, wherever they are in the continent.
Indeed. Would you say that Gondogwana's speech lived up to expectations, perhaps yours?
Yes, it actually did live up to my expectation and to the expectation of all the pragmatic people in South Africa. We can call it a very pragmatic, well-balanced speech. It was pragmatic balancing act because he had to take into consideration that we've got the Eskom electricity crisis, which has crippled many businesses in South Africa and is affecting many South Africans on a daily basis and is destroying businesses. And whilst attending to the Eskom problem, he had to accept that we've got in South Africa, we've got about at least a third of the total population being dependent on social grants. And something had to be done about that social welfare thing. And yet at the same time, we do not have unlimited tax collections to sustain all those service delivery costs to government. And I think he balanced it so well that there's no one who's complaining that too much attention was given to that particular department as opposed to this department. And moreover, he dedicated about 14 billion rands in fighting corruption. That is one thing we need to attend to in South Africa.
Well, on the other hand, he also earmarked 250 billion rand in debt relief for Eskom. How impactful do you think this amount will be in reversing the fortunes of Eskom?
It was not a surprise. Here in South Africa, in fact, I was here on News Central sometime in September where I was talking about the medium-term budget policy statement, MTBS, which takes place halfway between after the national budget and the following national budget. He did mention there that they were going to spend about 400 billion rands to free Eskom from many of its debts so that it could focus on fixing the load shedding problem. I mean, we've had 207 days of load shedding in South Africa last year, 2022, as opposed to only 75 days in 2021. It's bad for the economy. It's bad for the image of the country. So something had to be done in order not to bail out Eskom, but to make sure that they do not have excuses for not solving this major problem, which may collapse the economy.
Very well. Let's look at some macroeconomic indicators. The medium-term growth rate showed a decline with projections averaging 1.4% from 2023 to 2025. How feasible is this?
We wish it could be better, but that's a very realistic projection and prediction. Must remember that the South African Reserve Bank actually predicted that our economic growth rate is going to be at only 0.3%. So for the Minister of Finance to say it's going to be at 1.4%, which is in line with what the World Bank and the IMF have said, is very encouraging. The problem is, as long as the Eskom problem continues, that 1.4% may actually be a very big mountain to climb.
Now let's look at revenue outlook and tax proposals. No major tax proposals were made. Why do you think that is so, and how helpful could it be for revenue generation for the South African economy?
You know, if ever you want to draw blood from a stone, you cannot get any blood from a stone. So the South African tax situation is such that we've got a dwindling personal income tax base, as some of the high tax paying people are emigrating and some are losing jobs. And with the businesses as well, they are affected by Eskom, so they cannot pay more. So it is actually more of a miracle that the government was able to raise an additional 400 billion rands in order to close the budget deficit. So you cannot, under those circumstances, expect to get more money from either business or individual taxpayers. The base is shrinking. So if ever he tried to increase the taxes there, no one would be paying them. So it's better to be realistic and say, I am not going to increase taxes, but we are going to strengthen the enforcement and collection of those taxes, because that has been one of the problems in South Africa. The tax collection structures were not so adequate. So you had many people, because there were soft targets, who were made to pay a lot of taxes, and you had many people who drive very expensive cars and who live in the most expensive suburbs not paying any taxes because tax evasion was not easy to deal with in South Africa.
We'll leave it here for now, Professor Dumisa. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.